we welcome you all to an upcoming special series of Geostatus podcast with young expert groups in partnership with BRICS Youth Energy Agency. The BRICS Youth Energy Agency brings together young experts on various aspects of energy who sets hypotheses, conducts consultations, and delivers policy suggestions to the policymakers from the BRICS nations. Further, the expert group members are young individuals who represent universities, businesses, academic and research centers, as well as the governments. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Soumojit Mukherjee, who is a doctoral candidate and a student currently in his fourth year at the Moscow Engineering Physics Institute. He specializes in financial monitoring within the Institute of Financial Technologies and Economic Security. His passion for economics led him to Moscow Engineering, where he actively participates as a Russian ambassador for nuclear education. So I hope you are doing great, Sunil.
Yes, thank you so much, Nishan.
All right. So my question to you is, how is BRICS YEA an important platform for addressing global energy challenges and promoting sustainable solutions? Like, what is happening on the field and how is it going?
So BRICS YEA is I would say in our youth terms already an old organization, which was started in Moscow at the first meeting of BRICS nations in Moscow when it happened. So at that time there was a need for the representation of youth voice in the energy sector, and when it was formed at that time, since then there is a lot of work that has been done in the organization, and every year the organization publishes a special report called the Youth Energy Outlook, where youth experts like me and many others who represent their governments and different policy fields give recommendations to policymakers in all the countries, not just specifically BRICS, but broadly global south, on how they can improve the global energy outlook and the global energy demand that we as a developing part of the world will be facing in the coming few years.
Right. So as you said that you provide some expert analysis and policy recommendations for BRICS nations and beyond that. So is there anything specific that you can talk about within the nuclear energy and technology working group that you are representing? And what is the aim to provide that, like harnessing the nuclear power for cleaner energy or improved food security and healthcare or a mix of everything?
I would believe a mix of everything. So let me just go a little bit back and tell you what the group is about. So when we are writing the energy outlook every year, expert groups are formed depending on which areas they represent. So my group represents nuclear energy and technologies, because if you look at all the BRICS countries that we have, including the BRICS Plus, one of the common factors in all these countries is nuclear energy. Because if you take Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, all of these are nuclear powered nations. All of them have nuclear power stations. And if you add the new members, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, they also have either plans to get into the nuclear sector or are already in the nuclear sector. So, and there is a lot of cooperation in the field of nuclear energy amongst these countries.
Right.
So the main objective of my group is to look at not just nuclear energy needs of these countries, but also at how nuclear is helping them in the field of nuclear medicine and agriculture.
All right. So as you said, the use of nuclear is beyond the energy that people know as it is. So what other applications is there of the nuclear energy or the nuclear material that as we know?
So basically, we have mainly three applications of nuclear, let's say, technologies, if you use the right word. So in technologies, we are looking at mainly the area of nuclear food security, that is in agriculture, and the other one is medical applications. So in agriculture, there is a list of things that nuclear technologies can do. Some of them are like increasing the shelf life of foods, helping in reducing pesticides, or helping with dealing with invasive crop insects. That is one area. The another area is nuclear medicine, where specific radioisotopes are used. Firstly, in diagnostic issues, where you are trying to locate something in the body, and in treatment issues, especially in the field of cancer treatment, where certain nuclear isotopes are used to specifically treat some parts of the bodies where the cancer or the tumor is present.
Right. So again, going back to the nuclear energy and technology working group. So what plans do the working group take to develop a crucial leadership and technical skills among the young leaders in the nuclear energy technology?
First of all, we have started with a very basic step, that is to find all these experts in these countries, because that I believe is already a very massive project. Because although we are all part of the larger nuclear community, there's not any common platform for everyone to be in. So that
Right.
was our first objective, that we find all these people from all these countries, not just limited to BRICS, but even beyond BRICS, so that we can put together a group of experts, and not just experts, but also nuclear enthusiasts who would
Right.
love to go back to their government and ask them what can we do in the nuclear field for our people and our countries.
Right.
That was the first thing we did. On the second thing is obviously about publishing our report on the nuclear energy outlook, which will come out at the end of the year. Right now, the work is going on in writing that. And we believe that once that report comes out, it will have a big list of recommendations for policymakers. One of them is to increase the education level of students in some countries where the quality of education in the nuclear field is not very good. And another is increasing of popularization of nuclear methods. So
Right.
like when we talk about nuclear, first thing, especially in the field of agriculture, the first thing that comes to somebody's mind is radiation and how it will make
Yes.
people sick, and people will get killed or something like that. And obviously, there is a scare about genetically modified foods,
Right.
but that is a different area, and nuclear is absolutely different area. It's not related,
Right.
but still there is a scare factor in that. So that is one thing that we are recommending to, is there's a need to combat that.
Right. So, as you said that you are involved in the civilian discourses how nuclear energy can help you help the society as a whole out in some aspects of it. What do you think? As you have also stayed in the Moscow for a long time for your doctoral studies, and I guess it is still continuing. Do you think there is some, a shift in the perception, like how the Indians perceive the nuclear and how the Russians perceive the nuclear technology as a whole? Like, can you see a difference in the perception within the both the community of people?
I think when we are talking about nuclear in India and nuclear in Russia, Russia has always been a nuclear positive country. That is, the mindset has always been positive towards nuclear, although there have been mishaps in the past, but that has not changed the mindset of the either the government or the civil discourse. In India, we have always had a very good support for nuclear. Uh, Especially at the field of nuclear weapons. But in energy also, we have had a very good success. India happens to be one of the few countries in the world which has uh, continuously supported development of nuclear technologies and nuclear energy in our country. We have a lot of agreements with a lot of countries. India is also, if you go back to 2004, 2005, we have agreements with USA, the 123 agreement. We also have good agreements with the nuclear suppliers group, and we have made good progress in the nuclear energy field as well. And when we talk about India and Russia, I cannot not mention the Kudankulam nuclear power plant,
Of
which
course.
is the largest nuclear power plant in India.
Right.
And there is a joke about it in the nuclear community, that that nuclear power plant will never be finished.
Okay.
Not because that the construction is too long, it already, some of the units are already producing power, but every time there is a construction completion of, let's say, 3 units, Indian government always orders 3 more units.
Oh,
So it's like a continuous increase of units in that area.
right.
So it's a great thing for our country because
Right.
it's powering a lot of area in the south, and in the north, we already have our own indigenous nuclear power plants. Most of them are uh, either Pandu, which were made by Canadian technologies, like it's an old technology, but it's still there, or pressure water reactors. But these are all, most of them are based on indigenous technologies. Like we learned from the West some time ago, or from Russia some time ago, but now we are already producing our own. So that is a great thing to happen. The only thing I would ask our Indian uh, government and Indian authorities would be to start selling them, because right now we make them for ourselves only.
Right.
So it's a great business opportunity for our country also.
Right. So as you said that I have visited the Kakrapar nuclear power plant during one of my subjects. I studied nuclear disposal in India as a subject in my master's. So it was a part of that, and I saw that the time frame in which the whole nuclear power plant was created. This was back in the 1980s, so it took a very long time to establish it. But I guess there are some things known as a small modular reactors, if I'm not wrong. So what that
Yes.
is about, I want to.
So small modular reactors is a very new concept in the field of nuclear energy. So they are 30 megawatt our nuclear power plants, and that is why they are called small modular, small reactors. And modular reactors means that when you are making a nuclear power plant, a large nuclear power plant, so you go to the site, then you start construction. A modular nuclear power plant is, it's like a factory. There is assembly line. You make one, you ship one, you put it at the place, then you make the next one. Like it's like a big chain, logistical chain of manufacturing nuclear power plants. So
Right.
because it's a standard procedure, it takes much less time to create a nuclear power plant. And because it's like a small power output, so you can put it in many places.
Right.
Especially, for example, if you want to place in rural areas, so it will be a great option.
Yeah.
For bigger cities, obviously you need a bigger power plant, but
Yeah.
for smaller cities, very good option.
So do you think nuclear energy has some place in the energy transition discourse that is going on right now? So we are producing energy from the conventional sources which are not that much good for our environment, but we also want to develop our capacities in the green energy. So how I see, I'll explain you. I think that nuclear energy can be a great way to transition from these conventional sources to the completely green energy sources, because you need some time in shifting to the creating better technologies within the green technology like solar panels, like windmills. We need some technology transfer agreements between the nations, and BRICS can be one great organization for that as well. So how do you perceive that, how the nuclear energy will work in transitioning from the conventional to the greener sources of energy?
I would say that not just in the transition, even after that, nuclear should play a big role. But definitely, right now, whatever uh, green targets that we have, that every country has to go to net zero at some point. Some countries are saying 2050, some will say 2060. India also has said 2060, 2070. So everybody has to go carbon net zero at some point. So how do you get there? You cannot go there through only not general green resources such as wind, solar, and geothermal, for example, because uh, the output of those energy sources is not that high, or it's not that feasible for the big populations,
The
especially as
base
a
load
country.
capacity that we call it.
Yeah, the total capacity is not good enough. But when you are talking about nuclear, there is a very big aspect in that once you set it up, you don't have to care about it that much. Most nuclear power plants have life of about 50, 60 years. Even that is extendable. The only time you have to stop it or pause it is during refueling, but that is also after 15, 20 years. And it's one of the, well, it would be controversial to say it's a green source of energy, but let's say it's a gray source of energy. So it's much better than conventional that we use. And although it's not completely green because there is a question of nuclear waste, uh, we still it's still much better than all the sources of energy that we have right now. But
Right.
there is a small, very important point that has to be mentioned at this point, is that when we say that nuclear energy is not green because of nuclear waste issues, there is a new innovation coming in the nuclear sector. It's called closed nuclear cycle. So what happens is when there is a waste that comes out of the nuclear power plant, it can again be reused in different nuclear applications, including fuel applications. So once that can be achieved, there's a lot of research work going on in closed nuclear fuel cycle. And once that can be achieved, then I believe that then we can completely consider nuclear as green energy, not even gray energy.
Right. Right. So as you said that there are some risks involved in developing the nuclear energy. I mean, risks are everywhere, and as a community, as a multilateral organization, our job is to mitigate those risks. We cannot deny that there are no risks. Like that's very unrealistic to think in that way. So, as a BRICS as an organization, what is it doing in ensuring that this the risk factor is taken into account, and accordingly steps are taken for the greater nuclear security of the world?
So right now, inside BRICS, there's not such a dialogue right now because nuclear initiatives are initially or usually between two countries bilaterally, not multilaterally in such as BRICS. So there's not even a, let's say, a nuclear working group amongst BRICS countries. So that is something that has to be set up in the near future because there is an interesting problem which is between countries that the technology that we use in all these in all the BRICS countries is a little bit different. Like, okay, Russia, India, China, and Egypt have pretty much the same technology. Where we talk about Brazil or South Africa, they have a little bit different because those are Western, let's say, Western countries
Like,
based.
how is that difference? I want to understand more about it.
So this technology is pretty much the same. The basic idea is pretty much the same, but the protocols of working is a little bit different. So the ones in Brazil are run by Westinghouse,
Okay.
and the one in South Africa is run by the local power company. But the Russian and Chinese ones are pretty much same because the first nuclear power plants in China were made by the Russian Rosatom, and then they copied the design. So it's pretty much the same. In India also, when we look at the Kudankala nuclear power plant built by the Russians in collaboration with Indian partners, so also pretty much the protocol of working is same. In other countries,
Yes.
it's a bit different. Even in Egypt, right now, the Egypt is building its first nuclear power plant, and there it's also being built by Rosatom, El Dawa it's called. So again, it will be pretty much same protocols. So there has to be some kind of common protocol practices that have to come online before we start, let's say, collaboration in the field of complete nuclear safety cycle. But in terms of just nuclear
Right.
capacity building and nuclear energy expansion, there is a good amount of, I believe, cooperation that is possible between these countries.
Right. So again, as a BRICS YEA organization, like what are the necessary steps identified by the group to empower the younger generation to drive entrepreneurship and sustainable business practices in the energy sector within the BRICS countries, but maybe beyond that as well?
So there is a very important part about any energy sector that it's not just about providing energy, but whenever there's an introduction of a new energy or new technologies, it also should and would increase entrepreneurs and jobs and manufacturing in the industry. Now, the issue with nuclear is that it is highly regulated by national governments. It is understandable because nuclear is not just a civilian use, but it also has a military use. So, what usually happens is that whenever there is a new project in the nuclear field in any country, so there are local manufacturing, uh, con- local partners who manufacture components, and then
Right.
there are things that we have to import from other countries like fuel. So, for example, a lot of fuel for Indian nuclear power plants is coming from Australia is as uranium. So that is one part. And what we have identified as our group is that not only this can be this opportunity of expansion of nuclear energy in countries can be used as providing additional knowledge to the stakeholders, because when you're expanding a sector, you require additional knowledge to how to handle all these new components and new manufacturing processes. But at the same time, what can be done is that a lot of small businesses, MSMEs, can become a part of this energy sector by starting to produce small components or big components, even if they have the capacity for these nuclear power plants. So right now, I'm not just talking about the nuclear power plants which are already online, but also which are in the pipeline. So
Right.
one good example that I can give you about how this is happening in our country, in India, is that there is an organization called IYNC, Indian Youth Nuclear Congress, I think, and the IYNS, Indian Youth Nuclear Society, and they have come up with a new reactor solution, SMR. It's called Sukshma M or Suk M, which is again a small modular reactor which will be built, which is at the design phase right now and will be built in India in collaboration with the government authorities. So it should come online somewhere around 2031, 2032. But since is a completely indigenous design and it's a completely made in India proposal, so a lot of jobs will be created just from that, just by the, not just at the point when we are manufacturing those SMRs, but also in the point when we are planning, when we are scoping for area, when we are designing. All these levels and all these aspects will require not only additional knowledge creation, because these aspects may not be available right now in India, but also at the same time, job creation and lot of scope is there for a lot of industries.
Right. So, as you said, a lot of civilian discourse is already there within the BRICS countries. And if you talk specifically to India, I understand there are some communities who really are vocal about how the nuclear energy has some really good civilian uses, and they should be leveraged very well. But still, I see that there's a nuclear taboo somewhat. That maybe if that's the right term for this. There's a taboo about talking about nuclear. Like as you said at the beginning, when we talk about nuclear, we think about the radiation. We talk about how it may affect our genetic component. So, how do you break this taboo?
Uh, Firstly, there is not an answer, specific answer to this, and how do you break this taboo? Because the only solution is knowledge, right? I can give you the facts, I can give you the reality, I can give you real procedures, I can give you how it is research that has been done all over the world. But if you do not want to make up your mind with that, then I cannot help you.
Yeah, of course.
But our
But what?
objective, like I'm in a project called Russian Nuclear Education Ambassadors,
Okay.
where we work to give free nuclear education to students. So like if you are a student who has just finished school and you want to study nuclear energy or related fields, then you can come to Russia and we will provide you with a scholarship to study for free, even bachelor, master, PhD, any level. So you can come to Russia and study nuclear related fields for free. So that is something that a lot of people have been excited about. But when we talk about the nuclear taboo in our country, I will give you a very good example, which is from a real life example
Okay.
uh, that happened a few many years ago when we were just starting to make the Kudankulam nuclear power plant. So at that time, in that Kudankulam area, these areas used to be fishing villages. So it is just populated with fishermen who used to like go in the morning, do fishing and come back, and that was their livelihood. So when the first time the project was proposed by the Indian government in cooperation with Rosatom, uh, as always in India, there is a big public backlash on such big
Oh,
projects because there is a risk of radiation, there is a risk of mutation of fishes, there is a risk of people dying. A lot of backlash was there. And there's a lot of protests, and the fishermen were not ready to give away their lands for the construction of the nuclear power plant. So what they did, Rosatom decided that they needed to again solve this taboo and solve this problem. So they put the heads of all those villages, the fishermen villages, onto a plane and took them to China. In China, at around the same geography, as in like in a fisherman village, Rosatom had already made a nuclear power plant.
All right.
So they took them all to China. Then they used various translators who could translate from Tamil to Chinese.
Okay.
So it's like Tamil to English to Chinese, or Tamil to Russian to Chinese. And those fishermen there spoke to each other. So the
Okay.
Chinese fishermen explained to the Indian fishermen that there is
Oh
no
wow.
risk because we were also scared before that they will take away our fish and we will have radiation risk and all. And they said that now we have already living here for 5, 6 years and nothing has happened.
Right.
And it's just as normal as before. So this convinced the Indian fishermen that yes, it is all possible, no problem, we can live easily with the nuclear power plant. So they came back home and they gave the permission.
Oh, oh nice.
So that is one of the ways you can, prove to people that uh, it is all good and not bad. Actually, the issue is not about nuclear taboo. It's about lack of knowledge.
Okay.
Because most people, when they're growing up, they're like, even if you talk to somebody who was born, let's say about after 2010, yeah, so they might have heard about the protest in Germany about how nuclear is going out, or they must have watched the HBO series Chernobyl.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so when you come from that perspective, then obviously nuclear is very dangerous and we should never have nuclear. But when you go into the studying of these things, when you can, let's say, visit some nuclear power plants which are nearby, although like from outside, or you can go to some museums where you can learn about this. In Delhi, there's a lot of museums where you can go and learn about this, or you can get a visit to Bhabha Atomic Research Center in India and get some idea, and then you can continue studying on internet if you want. So then obviously you get more enlightened about the subject. And once you're more enlightened about the subject, your opinions will change because you have more supported with facts than just notions that you had before.
Right. So I see that you are a doctoral candidate and you are academically pursuing this. So you might have some insights in how the business of this nuclear energy. So can you throw some light into that and how the BRICS nations are coordinating?
This is actually a very interesting facet of the nuclear business because uh, in our BRICS countries, generally, most of the nuclear work is done by government entities. So, like in India, we have the Department of Atomic Energy. In Russia, we have Rosatom. Uh, in Egypt, we have the Atomic Energy Commission of Egypt. And for other examples are there. So, most of the work generally is done by government agencies. In the
Okay.
West, however, it's a bit different. Because if you take the example of United States of America, then they have private players who are working in the field of nuclear energy. One of the best examples is NuScale, which is developing nuclear power plants in some countries. So, or even Westinghouse used to be an old example. So that model is different from what we have in private entrepreneurship in our country and what we have in, let's say, in the Western area. So obviously, in that case, the only business part is that if you are working as a partner in the construction of the nuclear power plant, because the running of the nuclear power plant will be done by the government. So in that part, you are looking at component manufacturing, you are looking at civil engineering projects, because when a nuclear power plant is just not just nuclear, there's a lot of civil part is there. So you have to build the structures, you have to build the buildings, you have to build the domes. Massive project of civil engineering is there. So that is also there. The construction part is there. So lot of entrepreneurs can get into that. Then there is obviously specific component manufacture. Some components are manufactured in India. There's a lot of businesses in India that are already
Can you throw
doing
some light
this.
on the components as well? Like what are the specific components that are used in
So in a nuclear power plant, there's a lot of small and big components. Those component, by I mean that small parts that you would be using. So for example, if you were to use a screw in a nuclear power plant, that is you have to use a specific type of screw because that will not melt in the heat during the reaction, for example. So those are specialized manufacturing that some companies already doing in India. And the more they are set up, as we grow the scale of nuclear power plants in India, there's more chances of entrepreneurship. The very good example of this is actually Turkey,
Okay.
because when Rosatom was building the first nuclear power plant in Turkey, it's called the Akuyu nuclear power plant. They had a very good agreement where 70 to 80% of the components will be made by local manufacturers. So that allowed the country to grow its component business, manufacturing of components. That is also happening in India because most of our reactors are indigenous. So that is also happening in India, and I believe there is a lot of scope in it because right now only very few manufacturers are there. But as our country continues to grow the number of nuclear power plants, and we are in fact, the second largest, uh, let's say, orders number of nuclear power plants that will come up in the next 50 years. We have the second largest number of nuclear power plants that will come
Wow.
up because China is number one, we are number two. And since that keeps growing, the number of companies that can get into the sector will also increase.
Right. So, how is it like living in Russia, and how is the place? What's your experience in living in that nation?
Well, I would say it's a lot of fun. I actually finished my education from schooling. I finished in Delhi, then I went to Russia straight away to Moscow, and I started my. I did not do a bachelor. I did a specialist degree, which is like an integrated degree of bachelor and masters. And then I'm doing my PhD right now. So living in Russia is fun. It's a lot of. It's not as India, and fortunately or unfortunately, I went when I started studying in MIFI, Moscow Engineering Physics Institute. I was the first Indian to do so.
Oh, okay.
So for the first 2 years, I was the only Indian. So I had no other Indian friends, and I have a lot of friends who go to US to study or Canada, and they said that our groups are just Indian people because we don't
Okay.
have an option to interact with the local people because we don't have local friends.
Hmm.
For me, that was absolutely opposite because in my entire group, I was the only
Oh,
person who
wow.
was not Russian. So in my group, that was a very good advantage because it allows you to uh, interact well, not just with the culture but also with the education. Because my education is in Russian language,
Okay.
so I had to
How
learn the
is it like?
language.
You have to learn the language before, right?
Yes, I first year I spent in something called a preparatory faculty,
Okay.
where I learned the Russian language for 7 months, and then I started my education, where everything was in Russian. First few months were not easy because when you are just a learner of a language, you have not learned how a natural person would be speaking. The speed is different, the lexicon is different because they are using a lot of local uh, terms which are not in the official books.
Right.
But after that, you get used to it. You make a lot of friends, and you would find that it's quite easy. I would actually generally recommend a lot of people who, let's say, have finished their bachelors,
Okay.
even before bachelors, if you want, to not just in Russia, but try to go and outside and study, especially if it's free. Like for me, education was completely free. I have not paid anything since after finishing school.
Okay.
So if it's possible, then please go and get some knowledge outside and then come back to India. Most important part is to come back to India and not stay
Yes.
there.
Of course. I think it's very courageous of you to take this step, like just staying in a foreign country where you don't even know the local language of it, and you learned everything from the scratch. So congratulations to you for that. So
Thank you.
again, we are at the end of our podcast, and my last question to you will be: what is the future outlook of the BRICS YEA, and specifically in the green energy transition? And what do you think is possible in the span of the next decade?
So when we talk about the BRICS Energy Youth Energy Agency, we are looking at increasing our presence in all the BRICS countries. Right now, we are although situated in Moscow, but our projects are global. So obviously, we are trying to increase as much as possible our presence. Also, we would like to increase our impact. because one thing is to make policy, which we have been working for a long time, but also to ensure that that policy is implemented. That is something I believe that our group would be focusing on in the next few years. In terms of BRICS and green energy, I believe obviously since BRICS is the, let's say, the largest representative of the global south, they would play a massive role, especially in achieving the net zero targets. And BRICS YEA will play a massive role in that also, because youth recommendations that will come from our research and outlooks will go to the decision making. The decision making will be implemented, and once they are implemented, hopefully we are going towards achieving the targets that we have set. Because after all, irrespective of political differences around the world today, we all have to live in the same planet in the
Right.
next few years.
That's the need of the hour, I guess.
Absolutely.
So it was really great hosting you, and I hope that you also enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Right. So we hope to host you again in the future as well for such a podcast.
I would be very glad to come and speak to you again, because it has been a very enlightening and interesting conversation that we had.
Right.
Since you two, I believe, have some experience in the nuclear field, so it was quite interesting to get to delve deeper into these issues that we usually face.
Okay. Thank you very much.